Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the latest episode of PVM podcast. This is Anindita Trisha, currently working with Perfetti Van Melle Bangladesh Private Limited. Before we start, I would like to thank everyone for the tremendous support you guys have shown to our season 1. That is why we are back with season 2. And today we have a very special guest with us in our first episode. Let's get the introduction to the man himself. Hello, Ashrakat Bhai.
Hi, Anindita. Thank you very much for having me here.
My pleasure. So first, we start with a small introduction, then let's go on with the
Sure. So, reiterate my name again. My full name is Dewan Ashrakat Hossain. I'm a finance professional with around 17 years of experience. Currently, I'm working as the CFO here at Perfetti Van Melle Bangladesh. Let me just add on a bit more about myself. In terms of education, I'm a professional finance qualified ACCA. I did my BBA back a long time ago from Dhaka University, IBA. On the personal side, I'm married. My wife is a school teacher, and I have two young children, 6 years old and 8 years old. And they're the ones who keep me busy all the time.
wonderful. We'd like to know a bit more about your hobby interest.
Oh,
Very
it's an interesting question because I've realized that over the years, my hobbies, likes, and dislikes have significantly evolved. But having said that, I'm more of an outdoor person. I like mostly outdoor activities, whether it's traveling, whether it's adventure and outdoor sports. Uh, when I was young, I used to be very keen on football and basketball, and used to regularly play and be in the school and university teams also. Now seldom get the opportunity, but if I do, I will. But happily break a sweat if I get the opportunity.
very unusual for a finance professional.
Yeah. Other than that, I would like to consider myself a tech enthusiast. I like to keep abreast of the latest developments happening around in technology. And if I have the opportunity and if the pocket permits, the bank account permits, I like to keep myself updated with the latest gadgets as and when they're available.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And the last word to mention, I think one of the recent things that I've gotten into over the last couple of years, I would say, is uh, I'm more and more keen around the global financial market, around the new investment tools. I think as the emergence of cryptocurrency over the last few years has probably added fuel to that. So I do spend a lot of time now, learning about the financial markets, learning about cryptocurrencies, blockchains, that kind of stuff. And also looking at, the major movements and macroeconomic indicators and how they're impacting the global economy. I spend a lot of time doing that. It's becoming kind of a hobby right now.
Very interesting, very interesting. Since you're talking about cryptocurrencies and blockchains, what are the major trends that are impacting the world of finance currently?
I think a very pertinent question for podcast today. Uh, as we all know, the world is changing very rapidly, and along with it, the world of business and economics is also changing rapidly, and it seems to be transforming at an accelerated pace. Of course, finance being an internal function or an integral department within the scope of any business, finance is also going through a leaps and bounds journey. Just to come back, consumer expectations are changing. Regulations across there are quite a bit of regulatory shifts happening across different countries. What we see now and what we've historically seen is how geopolitical shifts and change in the political nuances impact supply chain, impacts business partnerships, and that also has a big impact on the world of business. But lastly, but for mostly, I would say it's the rapid pace at which technology is advancing the world and in line with that businesses. That's, I think, having a big shift in our overall economy. So what is the result? The result is there is a change in consumer landscape. There is a change in the competitive dynamics. There is a change in the business value change. And all of this is forcing companies and organizations to revisit their business model, to revisit how they operate, who they operate with, what kind of products they sell, and how they deliver their goods to the market. So all of these things are being affected by the change paradigm that we're going through. If I were to just mention some of the trends, of few trends that are shaping the economy that will continue to impact the economy into the going future. Number one, as I already mentioned, it's AI, automation, and digitization. Simple things like AI, like machine learning, like the RP and robotics, Power BI and stuff. These are all changing how data visualization is done, how data is represented. Robotics is changing how even the business model works. It is making many roles redundant. And along with that change, one of the other things that is happening that we see is the world is increasingly becoming more decentralized. A few decades back, there was a wave of centralization, a one size fits all approach that came in. Now we increasingly see things. Consumers have very specific preferences because of the geopolitics or because of business efficiencies. The business models have also become much more circular and isolated. As a result, there is a significant wave of decentralization that is impacting the overall business environment. To couple with that, it's the decentralization of finance. Traditionally, it was the banks and the traditional financing mechanisms that were at play, but increasingly we see with the advent of cryptocurrencies, with the advent of DeFi, blockchain, there are new avenues of financial transactions being formulated, and that is also changing the way people do business or people do transactions.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So when we think about a finance manager, traditionally we always think a person will work in Excel or in SAP. But how do you think this new technology or new things are actually changing a role of a finance manager?
Yeah. Before I go into specific to the finance managers, I'd just like to highlight some of the other nuances that are also impacting businesses that have a great impact on how finance operates. And uh, since COVID, we've seen how hybrid work culture or flexible work environment or virtual working, remote working, that has become a thing. Yeah. And that does have a major influence in how business models are being shaped. Often that also impacts how finance managers of the future are required to operate. Of course, we now have the myriad of tools that facilitate remote working and remote interaction collaboration. But that's also one of the trends that is here for the future. Another thing that is impacting the business world that will impact that finance plays a very critical role is the advent of the importance of sustainability, ESG, and other measurements of looking at how an organization is performing or contributing to the overall society in general. So long gone are the days where the profit or the return on investment or the share prices were the key measures that businesses judged by. Now the contribution to society plays a very important role in determining how an organization is measured. And of course, finance plays a critical role in terms of shaping that. Last but not least, one of the other big things that is happening in the world today is the availability, need, and necessity to analyze data. The availability of information and data has significantly increased, and now, as most businesses and most areas are being saturated, it's becoming critical to derive more granular inferences, granular insights. Right. To be competitive, to remain competitive, or to understand the consumer's need. As a result, the importance of data has become very, very important. We already see that with cloud computing. We see that how most of the big unicorn startups that we see today are in the business of data. Whether it's Facebook or Google, they're in the business of data, but that overlays across the whole of economy and all businesses. It's increasingly important to be able to capture consumer and market data and analyze it and draw the right inferences out of it. So managing data is becoming a key core skills that are a key trend that the businesses are now jumping into that way.
Right, addition of
So I said that now I'll come to in terms of the role of finance, and you can see that finance has always been an integral part of any business, and it will continue to remain so. But the way in which finance has historically contributed is now already evolving to a large extent. If you look at it historically finance has been more of a backward looking function. They focus more around recording and reporting, controlling, compliance. These would be the keywords that you would ideally describe a finance team with, and those were the skill sets that they would also focus on. But increasingly, finance is being pushed towards becoming a focus function that plays a more significant role in the strategic decisions of the business and plays a role in steering the organization through uncertainty, embedding innovation, adopting to the changing way of doing business, and steering that organization towards ensuring that the objectives are being filled. So
Right.
that's where finance is increasingly playing a more and more important role. So if I were to summarize with a few key catchy phrases, I would say that finance is going from being a storekeeper to a more of a strategic advisor. Finance is increasingly becoming a more data-driven storyteller. So previously it was more about collecting the data, recording the data, and reporting the data or saying what the data was. But now using the data to come up with meaningful inferences, to come up with recommendations for the future, and to be able to involve in the decision making. That is a core requirement or role for finance. But more importantly, to be able to communicate that to the organization. And that's where the storyteller or a good communicator part comes in. So it's not just dealing with data, but it's also making sure that you're a storyteller with the data, so that you are able to translate the data into meaningful actions for the organization. The organization also get the buy-in of the organization to pursue those decisions.
Very rightly said.
And then I would add to that is, in terms of value generation, although you'd think that your finance would always be a core part of creating value or generating value, but historically, I would say it was less of a requirement or pressure on finance to generate value. That is now increasingly changing. As most industries are maturing, as most organizations are maturing, and as the competitive forces are getting stronger and stronger, now it's increasingly important for businesses to look at the nook and crannies, to look at their value chain, to look at their pricing in a more granular way, and to be able to cater to those consumer preferences in a more granular way. As a result, it's increasing the role of finance in shaping the value chain, in shaping the business model is also becoming very important to grow the business in itself.
Great.
And last but not least, again, I think one of the most important roles where finance roles is strategic is finance is actually tasked with being the catalyst of digital transformation in an organization. And as you'll see, most organizations operate through a standard software package or an ERP system that we call it, and usually finance is the custodian of that. And with all the technological innovation and transformation that is happening, most of that is to do with that building block.
Correct.
And that's where finance has to play a very leading role in navigating these changes, implementing these innovations, transforming the business, and then taking the rest of organization along with that journey.
Right. So having said that, what do you think are the skill sets that are required to be that person or to be that new modern finance manager?
Very relevant question. Before I go into the emerging skill set, let me just recap or reiterate the traditional skill sets that are required for finance managers to be successful, which still remain equally relevant today and will remain relevant for future success also. And the first and foremost of it is having sound fundamental financial and technical knowledge, understanding the rules of the game, understanding the finance guidelines, the IFRS and other standards that are there, understanding the regulations, having good grip on the financial tools and analysis tools that are available, whether it's the softwares and other things available, or whether it's the methodologies that are available, which come from your academics. So having that strong financial fundamentals is a key strength, of course. Whichever business anyone is in, having a good understanding of the business, how that business operates, how the business value chain works, is an essential skill to be successful in any organization or any role. To complement the ability to analyze data and understanding the financial results and translate that into strategic insights, to translate that into actually actionable strategic recommendations for the future. That's where strategic thinking and strong analytical background is also a critical skill set that a finance manager who's pursued to be successful should have. And as time goes on and as a person becomes more and more senior, of course, there's a shift between his strategic leadership and his fundamental technical contribution, which of course gradually starts to increase. Which I've already mentioned, being a strong and effective storyteller, communicator, a good business partner, and having the ability to engage and influence people, that will remain a relevant and important skill sets. And last but not least, attention to detail, having a strong moral and ethical standpoint. And then to the day, finance will continue to be the custodian of control and compliance in an organization. So so that skill set will always be made relevant and important.
Right.
Having said that, uh, uh, to remain relevant for the future, it is important that finance managers also embrace and are able are very comfortable with the advancements that are happening and the tools and the technologies and avenues that are available to them and be updated of them. So we're being tech savvy, being digitally fluent, whether it's in the dimension of data analytics, whether it's in the dimension of AI and robotics, or it's in the dimension of cryptocurrency and like finance. So it's very important for finance managers to start developing them skills and keeping aware of the developments happening and be able to use these resources as and when required to pursue our business. I would just like to emphasize a bit more on that world of decentralized finance. Although we're in a very nascent stage at this moment, I think that's one of the sectors that will have a significant impact in terms of how finance managers operate. So this centralized finance, with the advent of blockchain, that is now scaling up very fast at an accelerated pace. And what is happening is new transaction tools, mechanisms are being evolved. New investment vessels are also being generated. You've probably heard of things like NFT or tokenized assets. So there are no investment facilities. Blockchains are now being used to complete transactions like contracts. You've probably heard of things like smart contracts, which are gaining increasing usage or adoption. So all of these things means that in a few years' time, the way financial transactions happen will also have a paradigm shift in them. So it's very important to keep abreast of that. And last but not least, again, I think to summarize with you, it's making sure that you are abreast with all the developments that are happening in the business world. Like I mentioned a bit earlier, consumer perspectives are significantly changing. What consumers want and what should be offered to them is significantly changing. So is the regulation, so is the geopolitical environment. So all of these means that you have to keep abreast of the latest developments and make sure if I were to term it into a skill set, I would have to say, resilience, agility, and adaptability. These are the skill sets that are required from that.
Have to fit to the new era. So, how can a finance student who wants to be a financial professional and want to work in this area can acquire the skill sets beside the international degrees, of course?
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, I guess the first starting point is the formal education of that degree, whether it's an undergrad or whether it's a professional qualification.
It has to.
So there are definitely that's the starting point where you start with the fundamentals of that knowledge. And to add to that, I would say that uh, considering the emerging avenues in finance that are coming. Now, many of the universities are actually offering different kinds of courses, whether it's at undergrad level or specialized diplomas that focus on the amalgamation of finance and technology, whether it's fintech, whether it's data science. So these are interesting topics and courses being offered by many universities and prospective students, other than their regular undergrad of finance or maybe a BBA in finance or economics. These are also avenues that they should be increasingly looking at, because the future workforce, there will be lots of employment opportunities in that vicinity. But having said that, my personal belief is the best learning ground is still through experience, and it is through actually hands-on work that you learn the best and you develop yourself the best. And for me, that would be getting into that right organization, getting into a good organization, getting a good role, which gives you different opportunities to learn and different exposures. That's a very good avenue or to incubate talent or to incubate your skills. So that's, I think, something that prospective finance professionals should also always focus on. First identify which line of finance you want to get into, and then try to find the right organization and the right role. It is not always the biggest organization or the highest paying organization or the biggest role with the biggest title that gives you the biggest experience. So sometimes you will not know where a great experience is, and sometimes when businesses are not in their best, that's probably where the biggest learning experience actually come from. So that's the mindset that people should keep when they're looking at opportunities. Whatever work they're doing, does that work give them the opportunity to learn and become better? Last but not least, of course, there is a myriad of free or cheap resources available. If you have the curiosity to learn, YouTube, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, there are myriads of courses available. It is for the one who has the curiosity to identify, because they need to do a bit of research to understand, okay, what do they want to learn, what will get done.
The problem is the resources are too much. So they don't know what to take
Yeah.
and what not to take.
And that's where my recommendation is, that you need to do a bit of research,
Right.
because there is so much at offer, and more importantly, it you should try to learn something that you can put into use, and that will give you a bigger benefit in the longer run. So having that view or visibility of, okay, where do I want to actually grow my career, what skill sets do I want to develop, and then trying to hone that, okay, what are those things that I need to learn because of that, and what are the free resources available. I think that's the right way to approach it.
Right. Of course, of course.
Yeah.
So since you are here, I have a personal question that I would want to ask you.
Sure.
So is there any modern way or new way that that can actually help us in our personal investments? Because the investments, the regular investments way that we know, like we buy bonds and other things. Is there any smarter way of personal investment?
Right. Very interesting question, and it's going to be a difficult question for me to answer, because there's two perspectives here. One is the global perspective, and then because we are sitting here in Bangladesh, there will be a Bangladeshi perspective where the opportunities, I would say, are drastically reduced. As you were mentioning in your question, what are the new ways or new avenues?
Yeah.
I think, uh, let me just start with the basics first, and I'll come to that new avenue. So historically, if we look at investment pool, let's start off with why people invest. So there are the two basic reasons, I would say, people invest. One is to retain their value as a store of value, and another one would be to generate value, or to generate certain returns from that investment. And historically, these are the two avenues where people actually have focused on investments. And what are the investment vessels that have been available? The biggest by far investment tool available is real estate. So investment in real estate is actually the biggest asset class global. It makes, I don't have the right number, but it's, I think, in excess of 500 trillion. Uh, the second biggest class is, equity ownership. So that's via the stock market or via shares, having ownership in organizations through stocks. A third very big investment tool has been gold. In fact, historically, gold was the major investment tool. And over the years, over the decades or centuries, it has grown, but it's still a sizable investment tool. And what has happened is other commodities, other minerals, and other commodities, the food kits, they've also become a investment vessel and allow for investment. On top of that, you've mentioned the bond market or the debt market. Of course, there's the government securities and so on. What is new in the world of finance over the last maybe 10 decades or so is the advent of cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance. What is happening is, with the advent of cryptocurrencies, there is a lot of uh, financial assets that are being generated in the virtual, in the digital space, whether it's uh, tokenized assets, or whether it is things like NFT, or the cryptocurrencies themselves have trading value, just like forex trading and forex investment. The cryptocurrencies themselves have a underlying value. And of course, the biggest one you've heard of it is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is considered as a store of value.
Yes, but nowadays you can buy things from stores like eBay.
Absolutely, the adoption is increasing significantly. I think very recently,
Bitcoin.
think I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, whether it was Amazon or Tesla. Most probably it was Tesla. Very recently, I think last week or so, I heard that they've again increased their scope of coverage via cryptocurrencies. So yeah, so those are I guess the new vessels. But having said that, like I was mentioning, that in Bangladesh we do not have the opportunity to trade in crypto. So it's not an avenue that is available. But even before going into what are the tools available in Bangladesh, just like to highlight that the five, these investment tools that I've mentioned, uh, where to invest depends on the individual or the group and their circumstances. And one of the things that is a key consideration is, your risk appetite. And historically, if you look at the overall asset classes, real estate and gold have been the have probably resulted in the lowest returns over the last decade or so. And having said that, they're the most stable and
No risk.
no risk. Cryptocurrencies, and in recent years, we've seen a boom of tech stocks. So the stock market, the likes of Nvidia, Tesla, and other tech stocks.
Right.
So these have had provided remarkable returns to their investors. But again, with high risks come high returns. It's associated with high risk, and you'll see these markets go up and down. If you ask me about today at this moment, I think considering the post COVID, the way that the global and the supply chain constraints after the Ukraine Russia war, the global macroeconomy has been quite fragile. And the latest developments, whether it's a geopolitical uncertainties that are increasing, or the very recent events of the tariff war that has been instigated from the new election in the U.S. Those are also having a major impact in the volatility of the industrial market. So, if you were to ask me at this moment, I would take a slightly risk averse position and observe the market and see the volatility before understanding or taking call on whether the market is actually bullish or bearish and which direction it will take. So that's my position. Just we were mentioning about what opportunities you have for investment. So I would
Yes.
just like
Also, I would like to add that how much investment is the right amount of investment? Like from the ratio, if you want to.
Okay, that's a very broad question, and it is very curated to an individual, their risk appetite, their current size of the wealth that they have, and also what they intend to do. So there is no one size fits all in this one. It's very much towards.
Is there any percentage that this percentage of your income you should invest or
I wouldn't recommend a percentage, but what I would recommend is you should have a sizable portion of your monthly earnings locked into investment so that it returns you in the future. The percentage has to be determined by you yourself, your circumstances, your salaries, how much of it you have disposable.
just there?
The second advice in terms of percentage would be to make sure that you not invest in just don't invest all your eggs in one basket. Make sure you have a diversified portfolio and you've essentially kept your eggs in different baskets.
Right.
The third focus would be to try and make sure that when you're diversifying it either by a currency, or by a product, or by a geography, so that your diversification is actually minimizes the risk that you have. And obviously, to make sure that you invest in at least a small portion of your investment. That's my recommendation, not to be taken. I'm not a financial advisor, is to allocate a small portion of your available funds for a bit of higher risk investments. Something that you are okay to lose. You won't lose your sleep if you lose that money, but those could give you higher returns versus the overall index. So it's always good to have that in your portfolio. So that would be my suggestion.
Very interesting, very interesting. But that's a very good advice, I would say. And any last words you want to get the aspiring finance students who would want to work in corporate?
Yeah. First, I would like to thank you for the wonderful session. I think we've had a great discussions, and
My pleasure.
my advice to the finance managers would be in line with what we've been discussing. That we've been talking about how the world is changing, and how technology is playing a significant role in shaping the future of this world. In line with that, businesses are evolving, and finance is playing a steering role in evolving that business. The traditional roles of finance will remain, but the focus or the importance is much more on that forward-thinking strategic contribution.
Right.
Which essentially means that finance will continue to remain relevant, and I think it will the scope of finance's involvement and influence will only increase as we go forward. So my call out to finance managers would be, finance as a function, as a way of work will remain relevant. It is the onus is on finance managers to make sure that they also remain relevant, in line with how the world is evolving, how the world of finance is evolving. And that would be to make sure that you embrace technology, embrace curiosity and learning, and make sure that you update yourself on the world and what's happening, and keep abreast of things so that you are able to transition along with your organization and the requirements of the world.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Ashrakat Bhai. I know you're very busy. Still, you have given us the time. And I personally have learned a lot through this session. I'm sure our viewers have too. And thank you so much, everyone, for your time. If you have still watched till here. And hopefully, we're going to come back with a brand new episode next time when we come. And thank you so much, Bhaiya. And hope to see you guys again. Bye bye.
Thank you, Anindita. Thank you for the wonderful session. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience gets some benefit out of what we discussed, but I enjoyed the conversation with you a lot, and I'm looking forward to another session somewhere.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.